And welcome to this afternoon with the Sewing Basket in Plymouth, Wisconsin. Today we're going to talk about our quick, fun crossword quilt. This is a fast quilt. I did this as just a way to kind of play with a project. We got these really cute Marcia Durst panels in that were the alphabet. And I like to do applique. Applique scares a lot of people. But if you think about it as just putting a piece of fabric over the top of another piece of fabric, we call it our over the top method. And we use a product called 606 Fusible Spray. 606 is a spray fusible, and we're going to talk about how to use that. So when we got these panels in, they're cute, but it's like, what do you do with it? It's hard to decide. So when I was a kid, I liked to do crossword puzzles and play Scrabble. This panel made me think of that happy time. And I decided that I was going to do a crossword puzzle quilt using some of my favorite things: fabric, quilts, making, and then pins and sew, all the different words that relate to my hobby. As you think about this can be anything. Carrie did a sweet little sign for us with some ideas. You could do this about camping. You could do it about wine. You could do it names of family pets or family members, travel, places that you've been. The challenge of it all is you only have one of every letter. So unless you buy a couple panels, you have to get creative. And I'm going to talk for a few minutes about how I did that. And then we're going to talk about the process of putting it together. So what I did is I took a pen and paper and I made a list of all kinds of words that were relevant to sewing and quilting. And then I started to play with them a little bit. Okay, the word quilt, I definitely want to use quilt. Okay, so those are the letters I need, and I wrote that down. Okay, and then what other words? I could use fabric, I could use material. Oh wait, if I use material, I need the L in both quilt and the I in both words. That's not going to work. So I had to figure out all the words that I could put together. So looking at, okay, if I have just one A, I used making and fabric. I used the I in fabric to go into quilt. Down at the bottom, you can't see at the end, I've got the word joy across the bottom. So how they fit together. There are a few tips and tricks that you can use. If you look at your letters and play with them a little bit. For instance, you see I have an I here in fabric, and I also have an I here in pin. Well, wait a minute, I told you that there's only one of each letter. Well, that's correct, but it turns out that I didn't use the letter D. So what I did is I took the D and I cut this part off. And that became my I in pin. So think about what you can do. That D can go upside down and be another P. An M can be a W can be an M. In my pin, I also used, I have making. You can't quite see that down here. Lift it for just a second. I have making, so I have an N here, and I have an N in pin. Well, that N in pin is the N from the panel. This N is actually the Z turned sideways. So you can get creative with how to cut up the letters you're not using and create other letters. The other thing you can do, obviously, buy another panel. But the other thing is take some fabric that's similar. The letters are kind of mottled and striped. If you took some similar fabric, you could actually cut out and create some letters of your own. So once I had my list of words, I started playing with how they would fit together. And obviously, there are also computer programs called puzzle maker type programs that will do this for you, but you don't have the ability to limit it to one letter each. You still have to kind of figure that out on your own. So what I did is I picked the words I wanted. I had a couple different layouts, and I just took my phone and I snapped some pictures of what I liked. Originally, I had quilt going across and then fabric, but what that did when the quilt was here, the eye for my fabric was way down here. So I kind of played with what the layout was going to be on my background fabric. So and the easiest way when I started, I cut all the letters apart and just cut around them. These are done, they kind of look like journal pages. There's two pieces that are connected and there's a little spiral in between. I just cut those all apart. And so all of my letters were separate. I went in my bedroom and I laid them on my bed and kind of spread them out and looked at what I wanted, snapped a picture, did that again. So it worked out pretty well. Once I had my pictures, I then walked away from it a little bit, looked at it an hour or two later, and it kind of jumped out at you. Oh, that one is really empty up in this corner. Oh, that one, everything's down in the bottom. Or there's nothing in the bottom. So those pictures helped me decide what I wanted to do. Then I was ready to start putting my quilt together. And I decided I wanted it to be just a lap throw. And so this is one width of fabric. And I cut a 2-yard piece. So it was 42 by 72. But I decided I didn't want it quite that long. So I took a little bit off the bottom. But I didn't do that until after I was laid out, because I didn't know exactly what my length was going to be. So I decided my spacing up here, how much I wanted, and then I had some extra at the bottom, which when I was done, I trimmed off the bottom. But I started with just 2 yards of fabric. And then I took my words and I had my layout of what I wanted and said, okay, I'm going to start with fabric. So I know above this, I kind of need room for 2 letters, and I wanted a little bit of space above. So that helped me place this. And I took my ruler and chalk liner. If you're familiar with chalk liner, this is just a little marking tool. It works great. I took my my ruler, and I just drew a line straight across. And that was where I placed my fabric. I put it through the middle of my letters. I just folded my letters in half and used that fold line. I could have run a line down here and placed all my letters on it, whatever works for you. But I placed that fabrics word, had it where I wanted it to be, and then I took one letter at a time, and I took my 606 spray. Just set this aside for a minute. 606 comes out kind of like spray paint. So give it a really good shake. The thing about 606 is it is set to be a permanent bond. It nicely fuses the edge of the fabric together so it doesn't fray, fuses it to your background fabric. However, it is a long fuse. If I remember correctly, I'm going to double check, iron on the high setting for 45 seconds. Most fusibles, heat and bond light, steam-a-seam, things like that, you're always worried about burning away the fusible. If you hold the iron too long, the glue actually goes away. That doesn't happen with this. It needs the heat for a good 45 seconds to create that bond. If you don't do that, and you sew these pieces on, and you wash it, and you didn't fuse it long enough, all those pieces are going to be loose. And if you don't have a good stitch around the edge, they can start to fray up. So practice on another piece. And I really like the mini iron for this. This little guy, the Steam and Press, love this. It's easy to use, fits in my hand, really maneuverable. But what it also does is it gets hot enough that I can press on here and it will bond that glue. A couple of my bigger irons, even on high, they just don't get hot enough. So practice on a scrap before you start. And the way that you spray it comes out, like I said, like spray paint. I've just got a scrap piece of batting here. This is one of my leftover little design pieces. Give it a good shake. And then I'm going to spray it. And I want to be sure it's good and solid along the edges. It doesn't have to be, it comes out like spray paint. It doesn't have to be like you're doing 3 coats of spray paint, but I need it to cover that whole surface and cover pretty well. I don't want to see any spots that are missing. When you look at it up close, it's going to be hard to see on camera, but when you look up close, you can actually see that it's coated or not. If you've missed a spot, just give it a little bit more. And when it comes out really cold, and it feels just a little bit damp. It takes about 15-20 seconds to dry. Now this is completely dry. It is not sticky at all. I can put this on anything. I can move it. It does not stick until you iron it. So that allows me to get my design laid out. So when I'm working on this, I'm actually at the ironing board. I had drawn my line across so I knew where I want to put my word fabrics. I'm going to take that and I'm going to lay it across my ironing board. And then I'm going to lay my letters in place. And then I'm going to take my iron and fuse them down. And when you are putting the letters on, remember you are pressing. There's a difference between pressing and ironing. Pressing is I put this down and hold it, put this down and hold it, put it down and hold it. Ironing is I'm sliding back and forth. We are pressing these in place. We don't want to iron because these can slide and pull. We don't want that. We want to just put it down, hold it, put it down, hold it. And that will fuse. I fuse my word fabrics in place. And then I take my ruler and I draw a line perpendicular to this one. And then I put my word making in. Okay. So as I went along, I put my first word on, I put my second word on. And then I thought, I decided I was debating, do I want to sew some and press some? I decided to press everything in place first and then do my stitching. So I went, again, was at my ironing board. I fused my entire quilt top. Looked just like this, looked like it was finished, but everything was just fused in place. And I'm going to take a second and I'm going to pull it down for a minute while we talk about stitching. And I'll try not to stab myself with pins while I do this. Okay, so I have this in place. And again, right now I have just the background fabric and my letters. And my letters are all fused. That pin out of the way, sorry. Okay, so I've fused this all in place. Fuse, 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 all of my lettering. And then I decided I wanted to use some decorative stitches. So what I did is in between the letters, I used different stitches. Anytime it's just two letters connected, I use different stitches. And then I use the same stitch around the whole word. So on fabrics, there's one decorative stitch all the way around. The word making, there's a decorative stitch all the way around here to here, and then it goes around the eye and pin, and then around the N and around the G. You can stitch whatever you want. You can change your decorative stitches, anything that you like, but I kind of like the way it unified the word by having the same decorative stitch. I also stitched all of my decorative stitching in just a creamy color. And I don't know if you can see that or not. Oh, it looks like you can see it a bit. But I stitched everything in just the background cream color. I could have switched threads or used variegated threads, but I thought this had enough going on. It didn't really need to be any busier. So there you can see at the bottom, you see the word joy. That actually is behind quilt. And there are some little characters on the panel. One of them happened to be a plus sign. And so what I did is when I had the words I wanted, I still had some letters left. So I tried to make any other words that I might be able to connect. And I had the word joy, and it was freestanding, and I had nowhere in here to connect it because that O wasn't used. And so what I did is I took the plus sign, and then I did the word joy this way. So quilt and joy go together in my world. And stitched it all down. I had a few pieces left. I put one in each corner. When I had it all stitched down, I decided how long I wanted my quilt. Like I said, I started with a 2-yard piece, trimmed off probably about 1/3 of a yard, 12 or 13 inches. And so I've got my finished quilt, a nice lap size, and I put my extra pieces. There were some, like I said, that just had designs on them, and a few letters that I didn't use. Those went into my top corners. Up here I had the H and the V. And that was all set. So that was the top of my quilt finished. Then I layered it with batting and backing. I used just kind of a fun map print for the back. And I like the color of this with the lettering and the background in the color. So I also used my backing, my leftover backing, for my binding. So that finished off my quilt in what I liked, a nice way visually to me. And then my quilting, it's going to be hard to see here, but I quilted it on my embroidery machine, and I used words also. So I'm going to hold it up and see if you can see the word blocks. Up here, I have pressing going up and down and quilting going side to side. You can see that? And all different words. Up here I have the word machine embroidery, the word blocks, sew. Down here, oh look, sewing basket, binding, free motion, stitch, applique, pins and needles, and iron. So those words became my quilting on this quilt. And I may go back, I've got some cute little embroidery designs that are spools of thread and needles, different things like that. I might go back and do a little bit more quilting, but for our purposes today, it was plenty of quilting to get it up on the wall to be able to show you. So in review, I took 2 yards of fabric, one of the big panels with the alphabet on it. That's upside down. One of the panels, I took my notebook, I wrote down all kinds of words, figured out what I wanted my crossword puzzle to say, and then took my letters, any letters I needed to create, took that D and chopped off the loop, and it gave me an I, turned a Z up sideways, and it's my N. So think about the ways you can do that, and think about what your hobbies are. I laughed and said to the ladies, oh, wine. Oh, you can have wine, and then I can have Merlot, and all different types of wine phrases. We've got some really cute wine fabric that would be a great background. Camping, games that your family likes to play. Again, family names, pet names. It's just a fun project. You can find the 606 spray and the panels on our website, sewingbasket.biz. Just go to the shopping page and you'll find them there. I believe chocolate liners are on there as well. Call the shop if you have any questions. If you're in the area, stop on in. You can see the quilt. And apologize that we haven't been with you for some demos for a bit. August was our 25th anniversary. It got a little crazy busy and we ran a little bit behind, but we hope to be back with you much more often with shop tour videos and some neat ideas and projects. Hope you enjoyed it.